Hello and welcome. Today we've got John Dowling, and today we are going to be discussing the currency revaluations of the Iraqi dinar, the Vietnamese dong, and maybe some of the other currencies too. We're very, very close to their currencies revaluing, possibly, maybe, most likely to gold. The dollar is just decreasing and it's devaluing shockingly. And we're just going to go through all of this today. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily news reels. John, thank you so much for joining me. How are you, and what have you been up to?
I'm well, Nicholas. Thanks for asking. Good to see you again after a little bit of a hiatus on our shows. Good to be back again. I've just been working on a lot of different meetings with different people, different podcasts, and trying to keep abreast, like you said earlier, of all the varying information that's coming at such a fast and precipitous pace. It's hard to keep up, but we have a fabulous team that really has their hands squarely on the ball and focus. So they help me kind of defray some of that. But just trying to keep my calm and my peace through all of the headlines coming and going, and just trying to stay focused.
Well, I'm very excited about this. A lot of people are excited as well. They're holding Iraqi dinar, Vietnamese dong, and when it revalues back to gold, it's going to put a lot of money into people's pockets and into the right people's pockets, which is the general public. They want us to hold on to the dollar. The other countries don't trust the dollar, and this is why they want gold backed. So we've been waiting for this for a very long time. We're very close. I know you've been sending me a lot of information, and as like others have too. Why don't you walk us through the presentation? I'll keep quiet, and then maybe we could do some questions and answers at the end.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks again, Nicholas, for the gracious opportunity to present today. Okay, so let me start by getting in here. Okay, let me know when you're able to see that.
Yes, I am. Lovely picture of us, by the way, isn't it?
Yeah. That's like we've done this before, haven't we? That was back in Miami last year. That was a great day meeting you and having some breaking bread. So this is a check-in, obviously, for where we are to this point, Nick, and we're titling this internally that God's timing is perfect and He knows the timing. We're highlighting the focus of watching the signs, staying faithful, and not being fearful. That's a real big key in this whole thing. Showing them that you trust Him through the waves and the winds, and then just staying prepared. And that can mean a number of things: prepared with information, prepared with food, prepared with gold, silver, currencies, and just also have a prepared mindset is really a key thing that I talk to a lot of my viewers about, as well as I'm sure you do, obviously. So that's going to be the seminal focus today.
Yes.
Okay. So the key topics today we're going to discuss, Nick, of course, is the latest update with Iraq as customary, where Zimbabwe is to present date. We also were able to get some slides from a very good leader in the community, TC, who goes by the handle Twisted Christian as the wealth transfer on YouTube. And he's been a very good teacher in this movement for quite some time. And the gold and silver, as you mentioned, some of the financial news, interest of news when it comes to banks, of course, BRICS that you mentioned earlier. And then we have a couple of nice slides that a couple of our team members found in doing some internal digging that were very encouraging for the movement here. And then, of course, our normal conclusion. Okay, so here's the latest update with Iraq. As you know, Nick, we've been talking for quite some time on our shows about the anticipation of Iran and Iraq having strikes and counterstrikes. And now we're starting to see that come front of scenes. A few weeks ago, Iran did a seminal drone attack, as most things are drone-based. Now, Israel has counterstruck as of, I believe, the 22nd, early this week with, I think it was at least 4 rockets and a drone strike. I'm not sure the exact number, but like I said, it was primarily drone-based. And so what we think they were doing was basically trying to test the infrastructure and the inner workings of Iran's infrastructure to see where the vulnerabilities or the fault points were, so that in the event that they attack again, which we believe they will, that's going to be the point in which they hit the secret nuclear power plants, which will again free up Iraq from both the U.S. militias in Iraq and throughout the Middle East, as well as freeing them from the Iranian proxies who are in government, just like our installed government here in the U.S. and for many parts of the world for that matter. So while everyone's got their eye on Iraq's reinstatement, all eyes optically will be on Israel. There's a few key things, Nick, that our team believes similarly will be the key to watching this happen. We're watching very closely. I'm kind of intermixing subjects here because everything kind of correlates. But XRP, we're waiting for the inevitable outcome of that case where they went outright, which we believe will lead to the firing of Gary Gensler at the SEC, who is highly corrupt. And this would be a major black eye for the SEC. The repegging of USTC and then the dinar to go. It doesn't mean that it will go that way. It's just what we believe as we see it right now is a key. And then there's some other things we'll talk about later on with Vietnam. What was interesting is that Soudani was, as you know, Prime Minister of Iraq, was in DC last week. He got a lot of things accomplished except for the military aspect of U.S. militias. We believe that's going to happen now that he's back in country in Iraq. Right now, he just met with Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, and they got 26 agreements officially done, which we've listed on our Telegram if people want to see that for posterity. Well, going back to the U.S. on this article, it was interesting, Nick, because he did a trip in Texas and Michigan. We were trying to figure out initially why he would do that. And what we've come up with is that in Michigan, there's a very large Muslim population with a lot of Iraqi banks. So he wants to make sure that his citizens living in America are taken care of, which is completely understandable. The Iraqis should go first in country. It's their currency. They should be given first rights with the ribbon cutting before anybody else is able to partake in profit. But then he went to Texas, and the reason for that, we believe, is because there's a lot of the servers for the dinar with banks like J.P. Morgan are based in Texas. So as we put the pieces together, it made a lot more sense than it did initially. One thing we're also watching for, Nick, is that as you know, we'll get into it in a second, but just as a summary, we're watching for silver to hit $30. It got real close last week, I think 29.16, something like that. And then, of course, the European Central Bank stepped in this week to save the markets temporarily, which tamped down oil, gold, and silver. But it's temporary. They're not going to be able to hold it down. Once it gets to $30, we're going to be seeing silver, Litecoin, and the Vietnamese dong absolutely soar because they are all intertwined. Okay, so now we turn our attention briefly to Zimbabwe. A lot of things, as you know, happening with them. A couple weeks ago, they took their Zim dollars and basically rolled them in or repatriated them into the ZiG dollar. What's interesting is they have QR codes on them, which we believe is part of the new digital economic reality. But if you look over here, Nick, you've seen these highlights we've talked about with Zimbabwe, that it is a bond note and why that differentiates from the dollar. We've covered that many times, but here's what's interesting. Nelson Chamisa, who we've told you we believe is the people's choice over there, much like President Trump here in America, as the countries copy each other. If you look at this billboard he put up on February 15th, about 10 days ago, he said that the ZiG and the bond are close cousins, if not Siamese twins. He's giving you a huge con. If you look at the note, the billboard here, it says one bond note, which is in their language, GDYE, converts to $1 US, 1-to-1. So what he's telling his people is that with big comms, once he wins his elections, which we believe will be, as of late, we think it's August 23rd as the elections could be, so they could move it up preemptively. But as of right now, it's the 23rd of August. Once he wins, one of his first orders of business is freeing his country, removing the corruption, and tying in the bond with the ZiG dollars so that it's all one and the same, basically. So he's doing comms just like President Trump. But that was a very encouraging sign, and they clearly do have the goal to do so.
Before we move on, how do we know that they're not going to change the actual notes and reprint new ones and say, well, the old ones are not worth anything?
Well, because I think that's a good question. We don't know 100% for sure, but whether they print new ones or they don't, they still have to honor the old notes because it's still part of the system, just like some of the old dollars that they took in and out of circulation. I think by the fact that he's telling you that the comms right here, Nicholas, if you look right here, it says the ZiG and the bond notes. He's kind of telling you by that, at least at present, that they don't have any intention to do that. So the short answer is we don't know, but I think it's a high degree of probability that they're going to stay with what they have and just meld it into one currency. Otherwise, they would have separated it out. There'd be no reason to meld them into one if they were going to do them individually. I think it's easier for them to just lump the bond and the dollar in together, back it by gold, and then just put it out, because it's been in hibernation for so long.
But if it's 1-for-1, for an example, do you think it would be 1-for-1?
That's what he's saying. We'll have to see. I mean, nobody really knows till we get there.
Well, let's say that's the best case scenario, and it might even be less than 1-for-1, to be conservative.
Sure.
Then does that, what would happen to that? There's $1 trillion notes.
Mm-hmm.
So what that would be like, that's a lot of money if you was to even revalue that to 1 cent.
Right. Well, that's, again, they have the gold to do it. You're not going to be getting physical cash. It's going to be in digital form. The last that we understood, I haven't heard it change since then. It may have, but we haven't heard it as of yet, is that they were going to do a managed payout over a 5 to 7 year period to kind of manage the flow of that, as opposed to giving it in one lump sum, kind of like not a lottery, but in a structured lottery for people to understand. So as of the last information we got, that's what our understanding is to present date.
Okay, that's just, I mean, even if it is digital, I mean, it's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a lot of money. And they're all right with people holding that kind of money and revaluing it and having it. I mean, is that the idea? What's the idea behind it? Because the idea, I'm suspecting, is that it would give the country more purchasing power. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they would be aware that people holding these notes can revalue them. And if that's the case, and they would have a lot of money. What do they think about that?
Well, the first thing we have to do to that question, Nick, is deconstruct it a little bit. There's a misunderstanding by both the Zimbabwe citizens, residents, if you like, and the public at large outside the country that have been misled to believe that they would bankrupt their economy. Just the opposite. They have the goal. They have the ability to do it. It's the short answer to your question is it's freedom. This would give freedom for their citizens to, they have believed all their lives that they're impoverished, just like, not unlike the rest of the world has believed that they have to be enslaved or that this is their fatalistic lot in life. But it looks like freedom and opportunity. They can rebuild their country rather quickly. The citizens over there can partake in projects just like we're going to do over here. It looks like they're not being dependent on the U.S. anymore, de-dollarizing, much like many of the BRICS nations. They can build up their infrastructure, their roads. They can get clean water. Clean water in many parts of Africa are an issue. They would be able to do all that, coupled with investing in technologies, which would play a role in those other items as well. So to me, it looks like a decoupling of control and a true sense of nationalism for the people.
Okay, interesting. Okay, let's move on.
Sure, fair enough. Okay, so this is one of the slides that we took from Trisha Christian and are giving him, of course, all due credit. What I like about what he says here, Nick, is a lot of times in this community, as you know, there's a notion that, well, there's only a certain amount of functions or a certain amount of categories within the wealth transfer, but this actually isn't the case. And as I've said to you before, the wealth transfer is much deeper and wider than people might realize or appreciate. And I think this slide helps to further illustrate that. So I'll just simply break it down a little bit. To this point, the wealth transfer community has lacked the seed money to participate in a lot of these projects, but that's about to change. As we see the stock market crash, as we see all these corporations, many of which are evil, going away, going out of business, that makes for a whole new sector. That makes for a new stock market. That makes for mom and pop businesses coming back. We believe we're going to see, Nicholas, a return to nationalism and a return to, which is just free money, free printing.
Sorry, John, you cut out there for a good you cut out there for about 30, 20, well, about 10 seconds. If you just want to go through that again. So sorry.
No problem. So this slide really illustrates, Nicholas, what we've been talking about. Shows that the wealth transfer is much deeper and wider than I think people appreciate. For instance, we see a corrupt stock market now, but we're going to see it going away. And not, I shouldn't say going away, but having a crash and being reset on actual hard assets, commodities, things of value. And the corporations that survive will have to do business in a completely different way. We're going to see more, I believe, family businesses, more nationalism, more of a return to the past years that we knew before the central banks were taking us over, before Nixon and Kissinger took us off the gold standard in the early 70s, right? The real estate market, we're seeing massive interest rate spikes with that. We're seeing a lot of the nefarious real estate commissions that have been going on nationally here in America are, as of July, being cut off cold turkey, and the whole commissioner structure is going to be changed. I talked to a good friend of mine who's a realtor in Tennessee. She was explaining to me that it's going to change the face of real estate. A lot of people who got into it for quick flips and cash are now going to have to go do something else because it's not going to be, basically the Ponzi scheme that it's been for quite a long time. We have the foreign currency market. We've already touched on that many, many times. We have right now, obviously, I wouldn't be recommend. I'm not a financial advisor, and this does not constitute as financial advice. I'm just sharing information. But right now, mutual funds, obviously, we wouldn't touch. But we don't know what the banking system, other than the QFS, is going to look like with respect to investing in different funds and bonds going forward inside of the U.S. Of course, raw commodities, hard commodities, gold and silver, soft commodities like cattle, wheat, grains, farming, which we touched on, the energy market, you're getting land, right? Going back to real estate, getting land. If you own land that has a water source on it, that has oil and natural gas on it, you can be self-sufficient and get off of the deep state grid, and you can be, autonomous. These are all things that people can do as a visual example to become their own central bank, right? We're going into the bonds right now. Obviously, we're focused on the foreign bonds, but in the future, we will look at different types of bonds that look totally different than the ones we know now that are in the favor of the bank and not of us. And then just an interesting slide that he thoughtfully put together about how much money is estimated to be in the world. And what's interesting is I had a conversation, Nick, this week and in the past with Bill Holter, who's a very astute gentleman in his own right about this discussion. And I asked him, how much true debt do we actually have in America? They're telling us between 34 and 35 trillion. That's, accelerating a trillion every 90 days. But in actuality, if we were to go back, when we go back to a asset-backed gold, silver, and other things standard, to pay off the debt, which I think we're just going to default and reset, but to do that, our actual debt is between 250 and 300 trillion. It's about 10 times greater than what the fake news tells us. And so that would preclude that precious metals' true value is actually in the six figures based on their ability to pay off the debt. But again, I don't think we're going to do that. We're going to default. But it just gives you an illustration of how much true money resources are actually in the world versus what we've been told all these years. So moving forward, gold and silver, not a big surprise to most people that, a lot of the nations are jumping in. We have 40 more countries jumping into the BRICS nations. Of course, Zimbabwe being another one. Nigeria is one. Yesterday, Sri Lanka announced their desire to get in there. And so what the BRICS nations are doing, Nicholas, is they're paying off the debt, which is artificial to begin with, in order to entice these countries to join the BRICS. Because what China wants is the gold that these countries have, like Zimbabwe, like Nigeria, and many other countries, India and the like. So you see Nigeria doing that. And then we kind of touched on this already before, just kind of reiterating the importance of silver. And silver obviously is going to be even more valuable than we believe gold because it runs manufacturing, AI, robotics. And in the future, when these corporations run out of silver, they're going to be running into the arms of other metals like copper and platinum, palladium, rhodium, what have you, to try to compensate. I didn't have time to put an article in here, Nick, but on our Telegram, we showed a part where the U.S. Treasury is estimating that copper in the future is going to be worth $10,000 a ton. So that's a pretty encouraging sign and a pretty telling sign of where the new economy is headed. Okay, you see here Putin and Xi, as always, the backbone of BRICS meeting. Putin just announced today that he's planning to go to China in May. So just further strengthening of that relationship. This is on Gold Telegraph. Yesterday, actually, a Russian court has ordered the seizure of JP Morgan Chase funds totaling $439,500,000, which is chump change for them. But it is a sign of the fact that Basel III is in full effect. And again, that keeps the banks transparent on their gold and silver balance sheets. If they don't have it, then they either go out of business or another bank will absorb them. So you're going to see a lot of banks going down during this period.
Quick question, John. Sorry, quick question. So it says here, a Russian court has ordered the seizure of JP Morgan Chase funds totaling 439.5 million, which is a lot of money. Now, how is that going to impact the bank's customers' accounts if they've got money in their accounts? Are they going to wipe those accounts out for the general public? I mean, or what do you suspect? Because if that was the case, then people would lose a lot of money and it would just be taken from them, from their accounts, and they would have nothing. I mean, what do you think about this?
Well, I look at that, Nick, in two different ways. Firstly, this is all the nefarious activity of not only JP Morgan, many of the banks. It's a slap on the wrist for them because they make billions and billions of dollars on a lot of these mortgages and short selling of the stocks, and they take a fine, they just keep going, right? So that's one signal, but it also signals Basel III. And it's funny you mentioned this question about customers accessing their funds, because I just saw an article this morning, I believe, that customers are reporting thousands of customers were having trouble getting at some of their funds electronically. I don't believe in the end that people are going to lose everything. I think that's the fear narrative that they want to put out. But what I think is happening is, we've talked before, Nick, about parallel presidents, parallel economies. So in the theme of that continuity, I think they've already got the new system, whatever it's going to be called, whether it's QFS or something else, that's mirroring their accounts, so they won't lose. They will get that money back. And this time it will be based on actual assets instead of fiat debt.
Okay, great. Okay.
Thank you. Good question. No problem. Thank you for the question. So for you Bolivar lovers, which I'm one, you see here, same source, Gold Telegraph, Venezuela is looking to accelerate the use of digital currencies such as Tether. That's a crypto, for those who don't know, for oil sales in response to international sanctions. So they're going to work with the BRICS to get around this. And they were the fourth largest economy in the world. They will always, historical replication, you always come back. They will come back in oil and gold and many other things. So, I get a question all the time about the Bolivar. People should have confidence that this is definitely going to be a winning currency amongst many within the construct of the new reset. This was an interesting story, Nick, because it was very encouraging to me for the Vietnamese dong. It actually even came out in MSN. So even the mainstream fake news is having to admit that this is happening. But there was I don't know if you heard this, a couple of weeks ago, there was a real estate tycoon, 67-year-old woman, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Trong My Lan. She was a real estate mogul, and she defrauded the country of Vietnam to the equivalent of $12.5 billion, which roughly accounts for 3% of that country's GDP. They then sentenced her to death. And they're sending a very strong message that they're taking strong, severe steps to removing the corruption that has been rampant in Vietnam. As you recall, Nick, in past shows we've done, I've talked about Vietnam. They don't have an economy problem. They don't have a financial problem. They have a corruption problem of communism. What I would encourage people to be watching over the months of May to July is the China-Taiwan conflict, because China is in a recession right now, and they need this, right? So they are working with Sudani. I forgot to mention this before, so let me mop this up, Nick, that Sudani told whoever he met with the U.S. government recently that they have been invited into the BRICS with the proviso that they reinstate, right? So he used that as leverage to get the U.S. to kind of capitulate and give up and say, okay. So that was good leverage on his part. But as we watch that happening, we all know the Biden situation and what's really going on versus what's being sold on the news. As the narrative for his health, much like you posted about what's going on in London with the horses and all that with Parliament, we're seeing that replication here as he gets ready to, at some point, to be exited stage right. That would give China a good vulnerability point to go in and attack a cursory level Taiwan, which would free up Vietnam enough from corruption, because they need the dong and dinar to save their economy and also back them up militarily for the future. So this is just a very good sign that Vietnam is taking very strong and strident steps to extricate themselves from corruption. Okay. So this is the BRICS portion. Obviously, I think this is pretty well healed. We've discussed this. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. For those who may not remember or just don't know, now you know. And inside of that is there's scores of countries right now, with 40 more countries coming in to boot, and I'm sure there'll be many more. We talked about Sri Lanka. Here they are getting ready to join the BRICS pretty soon. Nigeria's already made their intention. This is one country, Nick, that I would be watching pretty closely, Japan. And the reason is because they're having an issue with population growth, and they're also having economic issues because they've been holding a lot of the US bonds in the bond market, and they're tanking severely. That used to be, as you know, years ago, one of the preeminent countries for finance and manufacturing, and taking a lot of jobs away from America, obviously, particularly in the car market, computer, and other things. But they're having a lot of trouble now. I would not be surprised to see them run into the auspices of BRICS, especially when we look at the data sets for the bond market, the 10-year yield, for those who know that stuff. They're looking at about a 10% drop. And when that happens, that's going to be catastrophic for Japan and the whole of the global economy. You're going to see countries running into the safety of their currencies, which we all know about. We've mentioned the countries many times before. Iraq, Vietnam, Venezuela, Thailand, on and on it goes. They're going to power up their currencies and their natural assets as a hedge against the US dollar dying and the bond market imploding, right? But you're also going to see oil and silver and gold absolutely skyrocket as a result as well. So all these things have a very domino effect or a cataclysmic effect as you go forward.
So when we revalue the currencies to redeem, the wealth from those after they've been revalued,
right?
Which currency do we revalue in? Because we definitely don't want the dollar if it's going to keep going down. I mean, is there a cryptocurrency that's reliable and steady, or that's backed by gold, or I would say Bitcoin, but maybe not physical gold because it's too much? I mean, how would you get it out? In what form?
Well, I can only tell you what I'm going to do. Everybody's got to discern what's right for them because everybody's situation is different. That's why I don't give financial advice in that way. But what I am doing is building a private trust, take those federal dollars, convert them into land, precious metals, junk silver, again, personal choice, weapons, heirloom seeds, grow your own food, get a water source.
So you're saying the dollar will always be there. You're saying you will take it out quickly in dollars and then quickly go and buy land. I think that's what most people want to do. They want to secure themselves with assets, and you know what. But in the meantime, obviously, you want to make careful decisions of what you're going to do. To give back to the community, whether it's humanitarian projects, whether it's to do you want to buy up real estate, land. But where would you, if the dollar is decreasing, is there a cryptocurrency out there that's very stable where you could keep it in that?
Well, again, yes to all your points before, and then adding to that, it's not currently backed by assets, but we believe that it will be when ISO 20022 is cemented. The banks are already starting to adopt it, XRP. I think that's where you're going with that, XLM, XDC, X marks the spot. Those are all going to be massive blockchain protectors on the digital ledger technology platform.
Would you say the dollar will always be around? Would that eventually revalue once?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, do you think the dollar will revalue once the dollar's being backed by the gold, if it will be?
Well, I don't think the Federal Reserve note's going to be around anymore. I think it's going to be a U.S. Treasury note. It's going to be backed by, I think, gold and silver certificates like it was back in the day. So I think it'll be a return to the center. So we will have a new dollar, but it won't look like the old one that we've been living into this point.
So it'll be a US dollar with the Treasury, not the Federal Reserve, because we're kicking out the Rothschild family out of the system. And if it's going to be backed by gold, so that means there will be some type of new form of dollar in the Treasury, which we could redeem the wealth transfer through these currencies like the Iraqi dinar and the Vietnamese dong and the Zims through this new dollar note.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And that goes back to the parallel system, Nick, of it's already happened. As you know, we've already defeated the Rothschilds. All this stuff has already happened. President Trump did it in his first term with the sword dance and the football and meeting Shinzo Abe at that time. Actually, good chance for me to bring up, Nick, that it's funny you mention this because I just want to put this as a side note. President Trump, as you know, I believe met the other day with the new Japanese Prime Minister, I pray I'm saying this right, Taro Aso. And he's calling Trump Tower the new UN. So there's already been this shift in migration over. You look in Israel, the citizens there are protesting against Netanyahu to get him out. So you're seeing this transfer of regimes, you're seeing this transfer of corruption, and I believe consequently the transfer of the dollar into a new asset-backed treasury-based note.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so on that note, we're almost done, but I did want to share this. This comes from team members. We have Zach and Veronica did a great job of catching this and bringing it to my attention. Going back to March 16th, the popular show Wheel of Fortune, we've all seen many times before, past, whatever. He was making dinner for his family one night. He just had it on as background noise. He happened to look up and he saw this picture with Vanna White, and this is from his TV. It's not CGI. It's not enhanced. This is straight up from him direct. And the question was, what are you doing? And it says exchanging currency. You can see it right there. Now, to take it a step further, some might say, well, how do we know that's really real? Because people are so disillusioned and disenchanted with all the streams of information, it's hard to know sometimes what is real and what is not. And you have to dig in discernmentally. And then once you've done that, look for the information or have it find you through a channel like I've been blessed to do. And so Veronica found this and just went into Wheel of Fortune's website, went to the show archivals, and she found this. In round 3, they asked the question and they confirmed it. So this absolutely did happen. It's not a smokescreen. In fact, one of my subscribers actually watched the show and commented that she did see it and she almost fell off her chair. So this is pretty amazing. The good guys, the comms that they're putting out to give people little micro bits of encouragement as we go along the way. Now, I will, as give where credit is credit due, Nicholas, you did give me this picture here, which you were gracious enough to let me share. So I want to elaborate on this for a minute. Crypto Corvette confirmed that he did go to an exchange center in Texas, where Sudani was recently, and he checked it out. And they are putting up new currency exchange centers at malls and kiosks throughout America, particular locations like Florida and Texas. So one of our team members, Joe, lives in the Houston area. And there's a mall called the Woodlands Mall, which from my understanding is a very affluent area. I went to college with a buddy who lived in Kingwood, which is a suburb on the outskirts. So that's very affluent area and well-to-do. So Joe actually went over there and met with the owner. And this is the first time that we have at least seen, per our information, them include Iraq and Vietnam on the board, right? And so he said that the owner said that he was aware of the situation. He's been fielding calls on it all week. They're not ready to exchange yet. Obviously, it hasn't been released, but they are aware of it and they know that it will happen at some point in the future. And he gave him, his direct number, and when it's getting ready to get in position, Joe can then call and either exchange there or go to the bank. And this is what I mean, Nick, when I say to people that people have more leverage in this than they realize. Most people think that they're at the whim of the banks. They're not, because you bought this most likely from a reliable dealer, right? And so those dealers, all the dealers buy and sell. So they'll buy it back from you. So that gives you, the investor, options. You can compare the rates, compare the relationships, and use that to your advantage to decide who you want to do business with. Maybe you want to do some with your bank. Maybe you want to do some with an exchange dealer. But at least it gives you the ability to be flexible and have options, which we believe is absolutely critical in this time in terms of flexibility.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so last slide here is one of our team members caught this back in earlier this month on the 2nd. They went to Google, and finally Google is reluctantly admitting that Nassar Jassar is real per Executive Order 13849. And they've even got it here and we verified it. So that's pretty cool. The discussion you and I have had about Israel attacking the secret nuclear power plants of Iran has been prophesied by several people, most notably Matthew from his YouTube channel, Foot Forward, had been telling me and others about it 5 years ago, so credit to him. There's another woman here Lair Leitner, who had a dream on October 6th about it, and now we've seen it start to come to fruition. What we thought was interesting, Nick, is that they recently here, a couple days ago, Emerson Mnangagwa, the current corrupt prime minister of Zimbabwe, freed over 4,000 prisoners. On the surface, this looks like a political propaganda campaign to try to engender goodwill with the citizens for the upcoming elections. But what we also believe is behind the scenes, Chamisa is working, just like Trump, to expose the corruption, the bad guys, the nefarious details, and the fraud up front, so that people in the mainstream or people on an optical perspective in everyday living can see it and see who is really the bad guy and who's really the good guy as kind of the wheat from the tares begin to separate more and more.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, now we're at the last slide, basically, which is just our summation. We continue to pray over God's country, which is America, and all the countries are his. And we give homage to the late, great Kim Clement, who was one of the most accurate prophets of our time, who talked about the earth will shake and shake again, talked about Trump becoming president back on April 7, 2007, way before The Simpsons or way before it went public. He talked about there'd be a reset with the Dinar and other countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. Highly accurate in his prophecies, and was a great stalwart for the community. And then, of course, my closing Bible verse that I always like is Hebrews 11:1, which is faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things not yet seen. So I was encouraging people to not necessarily go by what they see with the physical eyes, but to use discernment to see what's really going on behind the scenes, and listen to that still small voice that will guide you, so you know what truth is from fiction. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, John. That was a very good presentation. Really enjoyed that. I'm going to leave the link below for anyone that wants to buy dinars and Vietnamese and other currencies, because a lot of people are asking. And as you know, it's against the law to sell Iraqi dinars outside of Iraq. So it's very interesting to see now that they're on the boards in the exchange, because this tells us that there's some kind of movement, and hopefully there is an exchange coming very soon, which is the wealth transfer from the corrupt people to we the people. Right. But John, thank you very, very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Well, thanks again, Nick, for having me. As always, it's a privilege and a pleasure. I would just say to your audience, continue to use discernment. Continue to take a step back. I learned a long time ago, between impulse and action, there's time for thought. And just continue to build each other up. We have too much dissension going on in our community of right fighting, and everybody wants to be first and everybody wants to be right. The real key here, Nick, is for us to lock arms together as a community. When we do that, the enemy can't get a foothold.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And we'll speak again very soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nick.